You're it. You're it. You're it. Quincy's. Any Quincy's. You're it. Quincy's. No any Quincy's. No startsies. You can't do that. Can do. Cannot. Stamped it. Can't do. Double stamped it. No erases. Cannot. Triple stamped it. No erases. Touch blue. Make it true. You can't triple stamp a double stamp. You can't triple stamp a double stamp, Lloyd. You can't triple stamp a double stamp. Lloyd. You guys. Enough. Hey. Want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
Oh, now I'm sad.
Welcome into Rip City Retro. My name is Rich Finley. I'm joined here, as sometimes, by Eric Brandt. Eric, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Rich.
Yeah, I'm just teasing. I know this is like probably the busiest time of the year for you guys over at Blazers Uprise. Is that right?
Yeah, we have a couple of our bigger streams, with the draft coming up this week and also free agency next week. This is the time where most of the teams make their big moves. So just sitting here waiting for the shoe to drop in to figure out what's going on here with the Blazers either keeping their pick at number 3 or trading it for hopefully a star or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, and as we're doing this video, I'm going to try and get this one out a little quicker than I do the other videos because of everything that's going on this coming week. But as we're doing this video, it's Father's Day. So I want to ask you, did you have a good Father's Day?
Yeah, I had a really nice Father's Day. How was your Father's Day, Rich?
Well, there were no surprise phone calls and no knocks at the door. So another successful Father's Day.
Where you're not a father. You are not the father.
Yeah, I am not the father. What we're doing here today is, well, first and foremost, I want to say, currently we have 332 subscribers, which is really frustrating to me because I can't divide it by 3 because I got one of those mental things. I just want to make sure that I say off the top, thank you everybody for subscribing to the channel. And please click like, share, subscribe. I love when people comment. I think this video, just a little prediction on my part, Eric, to this point, this probably will have the most comments of any video that we have done to this point. And that is because today's episode is about each of our top 10 most painful Blazers moments. Now, I had this idea for the show today, and I reached out to Eric about it, and I basically said, okay, this is just personal. This is each of our fandom. So we're not going to see anything on here, at least for me, about Bill Walton getting injured in 1978, that kind of thing. So this is all your top 10 painful moments as a fan, my top 10 painful moments as a fan. And moments can be various things. It can be a game or it could be a series. So what we're not doing here today is simply like the top 10 losses in Blazer history. It's not like that kind of thing. It's kind of moments in time where you really got a gut punch, that kind of thing. And we thought this would be good, and we wanted to hurry up and do this video just in case the mantle needs to be dusted off, Eric. And we put...
Please no.
Right. And we put another moment up on the... I hope that's not the case.
Yeah.
And we could talk at the end when we go through our whole list of where something unforeseen could possibly fall on that list. But let me turn it over to you. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, so on Blazers Uprise, we do post-game shows. And, the last couple of years, there's been a lot of games where the Blazers don't even care about the game. And they've been tanking and things like that. And it's like... man, do I really want to go do a 2-hour show after the game, But
or 3 hours sometimes. Yeah. My gosh.
Or even when we weren't tanking, tough losses or whatever, and it's like, oh man, I have to go and talk about this, and I'm all mad and stuff. But what I found is that just talking about it, actually helps, and having the community out there and them participating and stuff. So like Rich said, make sure you comment on some of your most painful memories so we can all live these together or relive them together. my wife, as I was doing some research for my list, noticed I was moaning and like getting upset and stuff watching some of the games back of
Oh no.
stuff. I just wanted to refresh my memory on some of the finer details of what happened leading up to
Like-
some of my moments.
Like how bad it hurt. Like
Yeah,
just right
and so
there. Yeah.
and so I had to like show her a couple of them. So we'll talk about that later. But I'm calling this the tell you where the Blazers hurt me episode, and and we'll take it from there, right? It's like a therapy.
Show me on the doll.
Point on the
doll.
yep.
Blazers hurt you.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. I love it. That is so awesome. That's great. Yeah, for me again, I just wanted to I wanted to narrow this down to just kind of gut punch moments. So you're not going to see anything like drafting Greg Oden over Kevin Durant, because in that moment,
Right.
like we were excited. And regardless of what anybody would tell you, 29 other GMs would have made the exact same pick.
Yeah, I didn't put any draft picks on mine as well. I mean, some of them, I was hoping we took someone else. Not the Odin one, but there's always like, oh, pick 15, like you picked the wrong person, but oh well, like you can't really.
Yeah, that guy in Milwaukee, that skinny kid in Milwaukee is pretty good.
That's more hindsight based. So yeah, I didn't have any draft picks. Are there any kind of ones that you were really wanting to put on your list, but they just didn't make it? Some honorable mention quick before we.
I mean, a couple, but I really didn't know where they qualified. So I'll just give you a couple of misdemeanors, put it that way. I actually, the Jailblazers era did not make the top 10 for me.
Yeah, neither did mine. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of looked at, like, it was kind of a slow, systematic decline, so it wasn't really a gut punch.
Right, super frustrating, but not like one particular moment or anything that stood out enough to make it over the things that I put.
I mean, Quintel Woods getting pulled over and then producing his player card for his ID is actually probably one of my top 10 moments, and I loved.
Yeah.
But I also
I saw him at the bar that night, by the way.
Did you really? Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So that was your fault.
No, I didn't talk to him. I befriended Zach Randolph that night. That was cool, but yeah.
Really, you and Zebo.
That's a story for another day.
Okay, yeah, we'll certainly have to get into that, and I'm sure there are going to be tons of comments now where people are going to want to hear that. But I also put as a mention, and again, I didn't really know where to put this, and this wasn't really a gut punch, but I just kind of put a little star by Sabonis coming over too late. Mm-hmm. It was more, Sabonis was kind of a gut punch in the way of whenever you would see the Blazers falter in the postseason, or come up just a little bit short, you couldn't help but think, like, I wonder if this Bigfoot out there that we've heard so much about could have made a difference. And then, of course, when you saw his game, even when he came over in 1995, when he was, way past his prime, I mean, when you see the passing and the way that some guys got passes on the cut, and you imagine what that would have been like to Kersey or Drexler, oh my gosh. But again, that did not make my list.
The only thing that I really wanted to put on my list, and I just could not find a spot for it, was the 2016 offseason. Finding out that we signed Evan Turner to a 4-year, $70 million contract, just a huge overpay. Not that every team didn't do that summer, because that's when the cap jumped up. And then we match a huge contract for Alan Crabb. And then we have restricted free agents, Myers Leonard and Mo Harkless, who we give big contracts to, even though we're bidding against ourselves, kind of. But then we signed Festus Ezeli too that summer. We would have known at the time that he wasn't going to play at all for the Blazers. But just the excitement of that season before, whether it was because of the injuries in the first round of the Clippers or not. They play the 73-win Warriors in the second round of the playoffs, and they lose 4-1, but all the games were exciting. It was dubbed by several people as the most competitive 4-1 series ever. But yeah, it was just a lot of fun. And the Blazers were super young and gave the Warriors all they could handle. And then so the excitement of that season, it seemed like we were way ahead of schedule, and we had all this cap space, and
CJ just won most improved player. Right? Yeah.
And then just getting locked into that roster and then not being able to do anything for several years because of those not only did they give them the big contracts, but they were all 4-year contracts, and they were all no opt-outs, no team options, nothing. It was just locked in for 4 years, and became a bit of a heavy anchor on the team for the next few years.
So we're off to a roaring start. We haven't started the list yet, and I'm already depressed. So let's start. You go ahead. Your number 10 pick.
All right. So,
and by the way, we should also say, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We should also say neither one of us have any idea what our list is.
We haven't told. I'm excited to hear about yours.
No clue. And you think there's going to be a very interesting 1-2 for us?
Yeah. Okay. I would be surprised if this is on your list, because this is kind of out in left field.
Okay.
For my number 10. And that is the treatment of Blazer broadcasters is number 10 on my list.
Not on my list. Not on my list. Go ahead.
So this goes back to the voice of the Portland Trailblazers, Bill Schonely, back in '98, was somewhat forced out of radio broadcasting, and just never really sat right. So they tried to put him on TV after that and tried to make it right and give him his job back later on, but it just was never really the same. Now, Bill Schonely's like the greatest person ever, right? So he still didn't hold a grudge. He came back and stayed with the Blazers the whole time, and
just a perfect ambassador for the franchise.
Rip City, baby.
He has been part of every Blazers moment, even announcing when the team won the World Championship in 1977.
Good evening, basketball fans, wherever you may be.
Became like, I mean, he is such a cool dude, just seeing him at Blazer games and stuff. Just
Did you ever meet Bill Schonely?
Oh yeah, several times. That's another story for another day. Met him at a team hotel bar in Phoenix back in the day, and then of course, like at his little restaurant at the Moda Center, he would come around and talk to people at the tables and stuff that were eating in the restaurant. So yeah, I got to meet him several times.
Oh, that's great.
Just super nice guy. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and it's so that started it. I mean, he was the voice of the Blazers. Like, you cannot, like, you just let him be that as long as he wants to be.
Yeah.
And you don't mess with that. And then that leads into, in 2016, we get the news that Mike Barrett and Mike Rice and Antonio Harvey all fired just out of the blue. Just canned them all with a year left on their contracts. You know, like, I understand nationally, you know, Mike might not have been the greatest broadcasters.
Well, block party. Oh, they're having fun. Got cigars.
I think they don't have cigars. You can't smoke in here. What is this, the 40s? Just blaze up courtside? It doesn't work that way anymore.
Well, it's legal now.
No, not that.
Oh, okay.
In terms of like X's and O's and knowing the game and stuff, but they were just like, for me personally, just watching a game with some friends or something, you know, like people that cared just as much about the team as you did. And I like that in my announcers. I didn't mind a little bit of homer for local announcers. Now, obviously, if you're a national announcer, you don't want to do that. But I like their homerism. I like the charm of them rooting for them. And they just seem like Blazers, like they were part of not part of the actual team, but they felt like part of the experience. And I just felt like that was a huge misstep. And this is no offense to Calabro and Hurd. They do a tremendous job. But I felt like that was just another, just quite frankly, just boneheaded decision by the front office to let those guys go. Especially in 2016, we were just talking about this, where we just come off that playoff series where we were tough. We're seemingly on the rise.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Barrett and Rice have been, with the team, and
they've been good stewards for tough years and things like that. And it kind of felt like, okay, we're getting ready to win big now, so we need you guys to move along.
Yeah. And then this is never really talked about publicly, but they pretty much forced Mike Wheeler out too, and I really enjoyed Wheels. I didn't think I could ever have a voice of the Blazers other than Bill Schonely, but Wheels, I mean, he pretty much became that for me, and it was crazy how much you could tell how a game was going just by listening to 10 seconds of the inflection of his voice. And so he started having health problems, and so the Blazers kind of unceremoniously showed him the door and didn't really care about how he was feeling and stuff. And now he's having more health problems, and I feel like the team should step up and take care of him. But
100%.
Just a sad situation.
I think he has a GoFundMe out there too. So if fans want to maybe look it up, you can donate some.
George backing up. Lillard doesn't want to pick. Dame going for the win. A three-pointer for the game. Yeah!
Number 10 for me was our first round flameout in 1993.
Okay.
Now, in 1993, so the Blazers went to the finals the year before in 1992. That may come up at some point today.
No problem.
Cliff Robinson had won Sixth Man of the Year, averaging 19.1 points per game. So Cliff had this steady progression since getting drafted in 89-90 for the Blazers. Started out as really a defensive big man, come in, give energy, block shots, but could also score a little bit too. That jumped up in 90, 91. And by the time we got to the 92-93 season, that particular season, Drexler missed 33 games with a couple of different injuries. There was the knee. He had a scope in September we talked about on the show before, and then he had trouble with his hamstring. So the Blazers really rallied around the emergence as a scorer of Cliff Robinson, and Cliff averaged 19.1 points per game. The Blazers were the 4 seed that year, and they had a 51-31 record. Actually, not too bad when you consider you're missing the guy that was the runner-up to MVP the year before, Clyde Drexler, runner-up to Michael Jordan in 1992. So you're without your MVP candidate for 33 games, and you win 51 games. And the Blazers were facing the San Antonio Spurs in the first round. And Eric, Cliff Robinson, who won Sixth Man of the Year, averaging 19.1 points per game. Do you know what Cliff Robinson averaged in that first round playoff series against the Spurs, in which the Spurs won 3-1?
I don't remember the exact number, but I remember for several years, Cliff Robinson, once he established himself, getting that label of not choker, but playoff underperformer.
Yeah. 10.3 points per game.
Almost
and
half,
yeah, and from your number 2 scorer but guy that was called upon to really be a go-to guy when Drexler wasn't there. And Drexler also entered that series hurt. Yeah. Drexler missed game 1 of that series, and the Spurs took that game, took home court advantage by a 1-point victory. I looked it up today. The final score was like 86-85. And then Drexler came back. The Blazers won game 2. And then stopped the presses. The Blazers had a double-digit lead in game 3 of that series in the second half, went on to lose that game. Spurs went up 2-1, and then the Spurs closed them out in 4 games. And what hurt about that series at that time was this was the year that Barkley went to the Suns. So it would have been the Blazers and the Suns in the second round. The Blazers and Suns had a very competitive regular season back and forth. So a lot of things seemed to be lining up for the Blazers in that postseason. The Suns lost the first 2 games of the playoffs that year to the Los Angeles Lakers, the 8 seed. So there was it was looking like, oh my God, are the Suns going to be upset? Are the Blazers possibly going to have home court advantage in the first round? And then the number 2. Round. Yeah, in the second round, sorry. And then the Houston Rockets had lost their home court advantage against the LA Clippers. I believe it was Utah and Seattle. So Utah had lost their home court advantage to Seattle, or maybe that was reversed. Maybe Seattle actually, I think, was the 3 seed that year. So they had lost home court advantage to the Jazz. So there was actually a picture that was forming that that postseason, where it actually looked like after the first round, the Blazers could have the best record in the West and have home court advantage all the way through the West Finals. And, of course, it didn't work out that way. The Blazers ended up losing that series. But Cliff having such a tough series, and I really feel, not to beat up on Cliff, and a lot of people do, and you talked about him developing this reputation as, a postseason underperformer, and we'll probably touch on that a little bit as our list goes along. But this was really the first year where it looked like this was the opportunity for Cliff to really step up and not just be a contributor, a solid man in a 7-8 man rotation, but really to be a go-to guy. And it was a massive flameout, and it was just a big-time bummer. And for that reason, that is my number 10 most painful moment. So what about?
I don't have that series on my list either, but it's Cliff. Just later, he became basically the number 1 option on some of those teams, and he just couldn't seem to handle that in the playoffs. Was much better as a 6-man role player, and unfortunately just didn't step up enough when it mattered.
Okay, Eric, so go ahead. Your number 9 pick.
All right, so this is something that we have talked about on this show before, like many things that'll come up today. But I know this didn't bother you, Rich, but I was a super Clyde Drexler fan. He was my favorite player. I was born in '79, so I didn't get to see.
Me too, by the way. Me too. Yeah.
I didn't get to see the Bill Walton days or the championship. So to me, Clyde Drexler was the Portland Trailblazers. He was the franchise player. He was the player when you talk about Blazers. He's the first name that will come up in my mind, as a child and stuff, rooting for him. Okay. And so this may sound petty. It's I know it's stupid, but it sucked. He was named the 50 top players in whatever year that was. Comes out. They all had a logo on the back of the jersey, got announced as a team for a team. And we talked about how Charles Barkley, even though he wasn't on the Philadelphia 76ers, was announced as a Philadelphia 76er.
And had been with Phoenix for 4 years by this point. And
this freaking guy, Clyde Drexler, comes out as a Houston Rocket? Are you kidding me? A Houston Rocket? No, you are a Portland Trailblazer, my guy. Like, come on. Like, it never sat right for me. I'm not anti-Drexler, but from that moment, I was always like, man, like, why do I care so much about Drexler? He doesn't even give a crap about Portland, obviously. And that just, as a Blazer fan, we're a small market team. We have to hold on to those things. And Drexler was one of the biggest things that's ever happened to this franchise. And so, like, how could you not consider yourself a Portland Trailblazer? And then after his playing career, you know, I don't know if I can't blame him fully for this, but, you know, he's never really been involved with the Blazers that much. Doesn't come to Dame's ceremony for passing him, which seemed a little ridiculous. And
he was in Oklahoma. I mean, if he's in Houston, that's a quick, you know, hop on.
And doesn't, I mean, before that, he's talking about how Dame should ask out, you know, just slightly so he doesn't break his record and stuff. And I mean, like, you can say whatever you want about why you weren't there and that it didn't mean anything, but to me, that seems kind of
or at the very least, in this day and age, you can film like a little hey, congratulations video, that kind of thing.
The Blazers go back to Portland, right, and have that ceremony for him after the game, the next game. And they had like a montage, and like even like Terry Stotts, who had just gotten fired a couple of years ago, like was on there, you know, and several other players. Like you're telling me Clyde couldn't have filmed a little thing for that? It just seemed like.
Well, his cameo is like $500 for a cameo video, Eric. So maybe the team did not want to pay for that.
Jeez, yeah. And then yes, this sounds so stupid, but like I am somewhat convinced that the Blazers got cursed when they retired his jersey as well.
God. Please no. First place in the Western Conference.
We're first place in the West. I was at the game. I watched the ceremony.
You went to Clyde Drexler night.
Yeah.
It's like Bob Whitsitt. That's leadership, guys. That's leadership right there. This is the year. Like so any hurt feelings per se, at least there was lip service given to Paul Allen's leadership, Bob Whitsitt's leadership, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, wasn't that Rod Strickland's first game back with the Blazers as well? Go ahead.
That day we had re-signed Rod Strickland, who had been away for several days, and Detlef Schrempf, who I swear he shot like 2% the rest of the season. Detlef Schrempf, he was like worthless from that point on. Like good player earlier in his career, but his Blazer career was very forgettable. So yeah, we signed those two guys to provide some depth. But yeah, we're first in the West that night, and it's not like the team got like injured or something. They just sucked from there, and then we went into the Jailblazer era from there. And then
weren't we playing like the Vancouver Grizzlies that night?
Yeah,
and we got rolled.
Yep,
we got rolled that night. Not that it's burned into my memory forever.
Yeah. So then we talked about how the Jailblazer era is not on our list, right? But like, so then the next, 5 years or whatever it was is the Jailblazer era until we draft Brandon Roy, in 2006. And so
exercise the demons.
But like I still look back on that day as like, did he like curse the franchise or something that day? Because like we've had nothing really since then, right? Like I can't deny that's like we were rolling and
that's funny.
But yeah, just seeing him being represented as a Houston Rocket after being there for a couple of years, even though he won a championship there and was still on the team, it just never sat right to me, and I just always thought a little differently after that.
That is a deep cut going back to Clyde Drexler, jersey retirement night. Wow, that was amazing. My goodness gracious. By the way, one of the loudest ovations that night was Mr. Rebound, Buck Williams. I just remember that off the top of my head. Wow, that's awesome. I can't believe that we so vividly remember that night. That night is still, I think it's available on YouTube if anybody wants to go back and see Drexler basically like burning incense on at the Moda Center, then the Rose Garden, and basically just putting a hex on our house.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to McDonald's Home Court. I'm Mike Barrett in the Post Up Production Studios. Well, the Blazers are riding a 4-game winning streak and have regained the top spot in the Western Conference, and they're looking to extend that streak tonight with the Vancouver Grizzlies in town. But the game itself has a rival in terms of interest this evening. Tonight, Clyde Drexler's number 22 gets raised to the Rose Garden rafters. Should be a thrilling and memorable evening.
That's really funny. Okay, so any other comments about that? I can't imagine.
I got him. So what's your number 9?
Okay, so my number 9 is probably pretty. This is pretty vanilla compared to yours.
My hatred.
No, not your hatred. That was really creative. This one is Greg Oden. Just kind of all encompassing, because this was just a repeated, like, just taking on water in a bad situation, you know, from the euphoria that the Blazers franchise had by getting that number 1 overall pick, bringing him in, and then he gets injured immediately. He ends up having microfracture surgery on his right knee that September of 2007. And then he comes back from that, and then he starts the 08-09 season. He ends up spraining his ankle in the very first game against the Lakers. I think he ended up playing, I think it was 61 games that season. By far more games that he would ever. He only, I think if I remember correctly, he played 82 games
For Portland, yeah.
Period. In the entire Portland duration.
Yeah.
So that one season that he played quite a bit, 08-09, he had an ankle sprain that kept him out for quite a few games, and then he had a chipped kneecap after running into Corey Maggette. Well, that'll do it. Corey Maggette was kind of like just very stout and really built. So in 2009, on December 1st, so now he's playing in his, I mean, technically it's his 3rd season, but it's really his 2nd season of playing. I've got here on December 1st, he had a career high in rebounds of 20 rebounds. And I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you remember, Eric, in the beginning of the 09 season, he was really starting to put it together. Like, especially defensively. And he also had a couple of, 24-point games and things of that nature, and just like multiple games where he had 4 or 5 blocks, and he was just such a presence. He changed so many other shots. So he really was evolving into exactly what the Blazers saw when they drafted him and exactly what they needed. And then on December 5th, he ended up injuring his left knee. He fractured his left patella in just a gruesome injury for the Blazers. As soon as you saw it, you knew it was bad.
Baskets before you get set up on defense.
Stola gives Brooks the pick. Oh, Greg went down, and his knee is. Holy cow, Portland doesn't need this. As the Rose Garden is like a library right now.
And you knew that this was a season ender, but also possibly a career ender.
Just watched it, yeah. Just him laying on the ground there. Yeah, it's burned into my memory. Yep.
Yeah.
Because the microfracture, the other surgeries, like they were just off-season ones. Like there wasn't like a moment where you watched him get hurt, right? The rumor was he got hurt like bowling or playing Dance Revolution or something, right? But there wasn't that moment. But that was like, okay, Oden's actually going to show some promise, and then to watch him go down in that situation and just writhe on the floor in pain, that memory sucks.
Yeah, and then November 17th, 2010, the following year, microfracture now on the left knee. So this was just, and then So you fast forward 13 months later to December 9th, 2011, and the Blazers announced that Greg Oden has suffered an unspecified setback that left the team less optimistic about his ability to play in the 2011-2012 season. And I mean, in February of 2012, Oden underwent orthoscopic surgery on his right knee. Later he was scheduled for the same procedure on his left knee. I mean, it was just, once it started with him, the poor kid, it just seemed like he could never, well, I was going to say, it seemed like he could never catch a break. I think that actually was the problem, that he kept catching all these breaks. It was just so heartbreaking. And I mean, when you look at take Kevin Durant out of it, and Kevin Durant has had an amazing career and he's still great. But just in a vacuum, just for Greg Oden himself, the trajectory that he seemed to be on once he got past that first surgery and what he could possibly become, man, it's a heartbreaker. It really was sad. And with each injury, that creeping suspicion, I don't know how you felt, but for me, that creeping suspicion started to sink in. Like, I don't know if this thing is ever going to happen.
Yeah, I was like, oh, well, maybe when his rookie deal is up, we can sign it for cheap, and then he'll reward us by being good. Yeah, and then we'll re-sign him and everything will be fine. But yeah, it never panned out. I actually have a different twist on this coming up, so I'll save the rest of what I'm going to say for my topic.
Okay, totally fine. So let's see. I think that's my number 9. So we're up to number 8. You're number 8.
All right, get ready to do your Tory impression on this one.
Oh, you want me to? Okay, go ahead.
My number 8. Again, this is going to sound stupid, but it's the Pelicans making the playoffs last season in 2022.
We're screwed.
We're cooked.
We're so cooked. Cooked. Again, for those of you who do not follow Blazers Uprise, and if you don't, what does it matter with you? Look up. Do you even know the title of that video?
No, it's just like a post-game show from.
I think you guys did that because you did the post-game of the Pelicans Clippers play-in game.
Yeah.
And the Pelicans won, and by winning, that meant they got to keep their pick. Portland did not get that pick from the CJ trade. It's an amazing stream. You guys are on fire at stream.
But anyway, so the story is the Blazers trade their CJ McCollum to the Pelicans, and for some reason they get the pick if the Pelicans don't make the playoffs, but if CJ plays really well and they make the playoffs, then we get a worse 2025 Milwaukee pick, and somehow the Pelicans had the Lakers lottery pick, so they end up with the 8th pick, which they were willing to give us if that was their pick, but they weren't willing to give us, just Cronin got abused in those negotiations. It makes no sense how that was worded and stuff like that. That should have conveyed that we should have gotten the 8th pick because it was top 4 protected. So it fell into that range. They got a pick in that range and made the playoffs. It just baffles me. But so they played the Spurs in the first playing game, beat them because the Spurs weren't that good that year. Right. And then they're playing the Clippers, and you're like, okay, they don't have Kawhi, but they still have Paul George, right? And then hours before the game, of course, Paul George gets COVID, can't play in the freaking game. And of course, the freaking Pelicans win and make the playoffs, and we don't get their pick. And it ends up working out okay because we still get Jeremy Grant and stuff, but using that pick and some seconds. But just having that second lottery pick last year might have led to a bigger trade because we probably could have gotten a little more or given up less in the Jeremy Grant trade and maybe traded back and gotten a few more picks and used one of those in Jeremy Grant and then have an extra asset to get our picks back from the Bulls. And then maybe we make another big trade. But it was just a gut punch to watch the Pelicans trade for CJ and then somehow make the playoffs. And we get worse compensation because they were good after making that trade. It made no sense and just made me very mad as a fan of the Blazers.
It's not even that transaction in and of itself and all the ripple effects of that transaction, but it's analyzing the lack of foresight that went into that transaction. That it's like you're riding in the car with somebody and they almost fall asleep and jerk back on the road, and you have this feeling of, I may not be safe here.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of that kind of feeling like, well, if you're going to do this about that, then you could do something really crazy, like end up trading for Kristaps Porzingis or something like that, you know? Like, I mean, you know. So, yeah, that's a really good one. I didn't know if you would go that route. That did not make my list.
All right.
You know, that could make an all-encompassing list at some time in the future,
Right.
just in terms of like moves that did not, you know, that kind of spelled doom and gloom on the franchise. But that's a really good one. Again, that's a spectacular stream for you guys, and I love the righteous indignation in that video with you and Tori, and the whole cooked thing, and we can't have nice things. Oh man, you got, and you know what? But you guys were speaking for all of us, I think. I think we were all mad. I think you guys have been a wonderful source for so many fans who have been like, oh my gosh, I'm so mad about this game. I want to go on and hear what Eric and Tori have to say, because you guys don't spin, you know, you don't spin on behalf of the team. You don't have press credentials to protect or anything like that. So you guys are just going to be honest and say what you feel. And that's what I try to do with the channel as well. I mean, a lot of people have said really nice things to me about having a good attitude and a good perspective and stuff like that. But I don't sugarcoat anything that I think about the team. I'm going to give you my honest opinion, but I try to look at things, you know, like find the positive in situations. But that is a situation where I could find no positives, and that was really, really bad. So that's a good one for you to pick. Okay, you ready for my number 8?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so my number 9 was Greg Oden. And my number 8, now this might be a little low. I guarantee if Tori was doing this list with us, this would be way low for Tori. But for me, and I'll explain why in just a second, but for me, it was Brandon Roy's career getting cut short due to injuries. I loved Brandon Roy. As I've said before, I live in Los Angeles, hell itself. And I got to see a lot of Pac-10 games back then, Pac-12 now, and got to see a lot of Brandon Roy play at University of Washington. Thought he was great. You know, we've talked about the old man game that he had, you know, and he can't really jump that high, can't really move that fast, but he seems to be able to get everywhere that he wants to go. There was the mad respect from Kobe that Brandon Roy had, which I don't know, it's just as a Blazer fan, like you wore that as a badge of honor. Like that was great. Ron Artest.
Well, Dame got it too.
Well, Dame got it too from Kobe. Yeah, he got the blessing on opening night from Kobe. Yeah. But you know, when Ron Artest was an elite defender, saying Brandon Roy is his toughest guard in the league, Roy was phenomenal. I was actually at the Clipper game where he had the massive highlight dunk that has been shown of him for years and years.
Early in this NBA season, he's getting his opportunities, making the most. Roy goes inside and posterizes. Check some.
Senegal gets a poster early in the year.
The crowd oohing and eyeing.
And the entire arena, when he did that, everybody just went, ooh. And like just watching the monitor. Oh, I'm totally going to play it right here. So I loved Roy. The reason this did not go higher was because, and thankfully, it's not like, you know, this is not like a car crash. Like I probably will show the Oden injury, not to be morbid, but just so people can kind of remember what those moments were like when we had them. But we had heard about the meniscus when he had the surgery and then played in the playoffs just a few days later. And Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith were losing their mind over the fact that the Blazers franchise would let Brandon play in a playoff game that soon after getting his
8 days or something.
Yeah, it was something crazy like that. And he came off the bench and played great. They still ended up losing that series in 6 games to the Suns, but not quite like Oden. But there was a little bit of that slow drip of more trouble with Brandon's knees and things like that. And then we come to the legendary 2011 Game 4 that Brandon had, in which he scored 18 points in the fourth quarter, led the Blazers back from a huge deficit against the Dallas Mavericks. I'll probably show some of it right here.
And boy, did Dallas need that one to go down.
A double-double performance for Sean Marion here in Game 4. Brandon Roy! Brandon Roy, the 3, count it! And there's a foul! And a chance to tie it.
Wow. What a shot by Brandon Roy, and the foul, and a chance for a 4-point play, Matt, here to tie up this game.
4-point play, ties it up.
Give it to him, either run a little screen roll for him or let him just flatten it out and take it.
So the call reversed.
Yeah.
After checking the video. Roy for the lead, banks it in. 84-82. Timeout, Dallas.
I don't know how you felt, Eric, but I'll just be honest. I'll give it up as I'm doing this. I teared up watching that game. I was watching it here in Los Angeles, and it just felt like here's a guy reaching back for every ounce of old flashes of what he used to be able to do it one last time. And we as fans hope that it would translate over to, okay, maybe he's got his confidence back, because there were a lot of people that were saying, well, Brandon's game is suffering from a lack of confidence. Well, he really had bone-on-bone knees. He had no cartilage in his knees. And so watching that Game 4 performance, and I'll always remember Marcus Camby's reaction. I don't know if you remember this, but the team all rallied around Roy at the end of that game when they won the game. When I believe it was either Jason Terry. I think it was Jason Terry's shot rimmed off or whatever.
He missed. Yep, it was Jason Terry for sure.
I was thinking it was either Jason Kidd, but I think it was a Jason Kidd pass to Jason Terry. It was a Jason. But
I had a run in with Jason Terry at Oregon State.
Another story.
Talking crap to him at a game, but
okay.
Yeah.
One of our episodes are going to be all your stories.
So that game happened, right? Super emotional, right?
Yeah.
I saw him catch that pass, and I just, because there was, it's not a very long story. I was talking crap to him as a punk kid at Oregon State, and he proceeded to make several threes in a row against the Beavers, and then start pointing at me every time he made one. And I was like, oh yeah, lightning struck twice, and all that stuff. And anyways, so flashing back to this game, he caught that ball and pulled up, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Jason Terry. He's gonna freaking ruin Brandon Roy's night with the shot at the buzzer.
Oh, kid, remember, no timeouts. Here's Terry. No. Portland wins Game 4. emotional Brandon Roy. What a moment. A Game 4 moment.
I mean, it was kind of like you knew this relationship was ending. And then there was the whole mess with his contract. The Blazers, I think, wanted to medically insure all of it, and Brandon Roy thought that was insulting. And
well, they amnestied him.
Yeah, they ended up amnestying him with the new CBA, and
then he went to Minnesota for like 5 games.
Yeah. So yeah, it was just such a bummer because he was such a special player, but he'll always be that guy who helped bring Portland basketball back to the city, and after some down years, and so whether it was for a long time, he always has that. But yeah, I just feel so bad for him personally because he could have been, I mean, not necessarily an all-time great, but I mean, he could have been, one of those type of players who, ends up being a 10-time All-Star, several All-NBA teams, and is considered for, this top 75 player team a few years ago. So, yeah, it's just a bummer, but yeah.
Yeah, that was a real bummer. So that is my number 8 most painful moment. So let's move on to number 7 for you. So what is number 7 for you?
All right, so the Pelicans make their second straight appearance for me, and I have the 2018 sweep by the Blazers.
This did not make my list anywhere.
Of the Blazers, yeah. So
okay, I'm glad you picked this.
So the Blazers had a really good regular season, finished with the 3rd seed. This was they were finally starting to play a little better. We talked about how the 2016 offseason earlier and how that led into a bad 2017, but then they got Nurkic in that season before and had the Nurk fever run, but then he was hurt and they get swept out of the playoffs because they're playing the Warriors.
Right.
But
so this is our first full season of Nurk.
Yeah, and he came into camp skinny Nurk that year. He wasn't as dominant, but he was relatively healthy most of the year.
Yeah.
And the team overall was relatively healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I want to say this was the year Dame had Dame Jr. Right before, like a few weeks before the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. And Dame was
maybe
gassed by the playoffs. And then so then you get into the playoffs, and Blazers had home court advantage. They're playing the 6th seed. The Pelicans had Anthony Davis and several veterans like Drew Holiday and
Drew Holiday, big deal.
And Mirotic, who gave us trouble.
Oh my God, he was a beast that series.
But the frustrating part for me was just watching Portland throw out the same pick and roll game plan and just watch them trap it every time. And then we're still just running the same plays right into what their defense wants us to do.
Yeah.
While Rajon Rondo's calling out the plays before we even run them because it's so predictable and obvious. And so it's just Dame wasn't. He hadn't. I mean, he was always like super good, but like his best season started in 2020. I mean, he was amazing those seasons, but like he shot some deep threes, but he wasn't like. He developed a deeper three simply because like it extended it out in the defense and he could maybe avoid traps the further he shot. But to me, it's like this is when, even if you kind of thought Stotts was a good coach, like just the fact that he made no adjustments in this series and just continued to run the same defense, the same offense, and watch this series just dwindle away and the Blazers get swept. It just never sat right to me. And then of course, the story goes that Paul Allen was going to fire Stotts that offseason, but Dame went and vouched for him, which was his right to do.
Sure.
But the Pelicans never really, they had injury problems, but they never really were a factor in the playoffs any other series with Anthony Davis.
Right.
So like this was their one moment in the playoffs, the entire Anthony Davis tenure. So it's always bugged me that the Blazers were relatively healthy, and they just did not try anything really to do anything to change the momentum of the series or anything like that.
Yeah, it was one of those things where your franchise can reach a certain level. Like you can have a coach come in that sets your culture, right? But it's not necessarily your championship level coach. Like you're not quite ready for the big leagues yet, that kind of thing. But in terms of coming in, setting up a system, setting up a culture, et cetera, I felt like, I mean, you can say whether Stotts did a good job or not. I mean, also having Damian Lillard on your squad is going to help with leadership and culture setting as well. But that 2018 reprieve for Stotts, and this isn't to beat up on Stotts, but that was kind of the moment to stop this thing. It was kind of like that group with that coaching staff peaked right there, and you saw the shortcomings in the game planning in that series, and everything was illuminated in that series. And now people are going to come back and go, well, in 2019 they make it all the way to the Western Conference Finals, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
But if the team was going to, I feel like not moving off of Stotts ended up impacting this team, for like the next 3 years.
Yeah, well, I just want to touch on the 2019 thing real quick. So they play OKC in the first round, right? They were also the 3rd seed that year, and
were the underdogs as the 3 seed.
For some reason, OKC barely traps Dame. Like they had the blueprint, right, from the year before. They had Jeremy Grant on that roster. They had several athletic players, Paul George. Like they could have trapped Dame, but they didn't very often in that series. And Dame made him pay. It scores 50 in game 5,
right.
And including the bye-bye.
Well, they let it, OKC let it become a mano-a-mano with Russ, and that was just, I mean, you want to talk about bad coaching. It's a terrible move on the part of Billy Donovan to do that.
Well, and then the next series, Denver did, I mean, Dame had a really good game 6, but game 7, they take Dame out of the game for the most part, and luckily CJ steps up there and scores a bunch of baskets, but Portland didn't change. It was just perplexing to me because we knew what had happened the year before. We knew we had to get more creative to run something other than just straight pick and roll, and maybe play Dame off ball a little more or do something different with him other than just straight pick and roll. And they just kept doing it, and then they go into the Warrior series, and I mean Draymond is such a good help defender and all that. So like they just got abused in that series. And then
had a lead in every game.
And guess what? They had one defensive coverage. It was drop scheme. They didn't have any other counters the entire season. No matter how good or bad it did, they always just ran the same basic defense, and they freaking run it against Steph Curry in game 1, and they're just like leaving him open for 3. And then they try to adjust later in the series. Finally, they make an adjustment, right? But these players hadn't done it all season, so it was clunky and slow and didn't materialize fast enough. So a team like Golden State with a bunch of smart players just picked it apart, and you're never going to get it locked in without practicing it ever until the game moments of the Western Conference Finals. It's just ridiculous.
It's a bad sign when you're running the defense that your star player loves to play against.
Right, yeah.
That's probably not good.
I dream of Dame playing against that type of defense in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a good one. The 2018 sweep, it didn't even make my list. Mainly because I was trying to just contain it to moments, how they impacted me at the time. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I thought about the 2018 sweep, but I thought at that time I looked at it like, okay, we're still like incrementally, like I really thought at that time, if we weren't going to fire Stotts, I was like, well, this clearly now has to be addressed, right? Like we can't go into the next season and just be, because it's different when you're trotting a team out in the regular season as opposed to giving teams a week and a half, and then in between games in a 7-game series to prepare for Dame and CJ and how they're going to cover the pick and roll and things of that nature with Dame. When you're doing it a 1-game sample size, when a team has just played in Sacramento the night before and they're rolling into Portland on the second night of a back-to-back, yeah, you're going to catch teams and they're not going to be ready to prepare. That's why you see teams have such great regular season success. We just saw the Sacramento Kings have, a 3 seed, but then once they get in the playoffs against a team who's experienced and knows how to, deal with these things, you're going to flame out because you're not really built for postseason success. So, that series hurt. But I'm glad that you included it. But yeah, it didn't make my list. So that is, what was that for you? That was
my 7th. What is your 7th? That was your 7.
Okay.
You need to take a break.
So, no. I'm good. I'm just taking a breath before we do this one. Number 7. Now we're really starting to get into the pain. Okay. Number 7. What were you doing on March 5th, 2015?
March 5th, 2015. I don't know.
Your Portland Trailblazers were at home playing against the Dallas Mavericks.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And Wesley Matthews, who had never missed the game in his entire career. That's why they called him the Iron Man. The Iron Man wasn't hyperbole or anything like that. It was a legitimate thing. Wesley Matthews went down with an Achilles tear, and it completely derails the Blazers season. On that night, the Blazers were 3rd in the West, and Golden State, that was the year that Golden State won the title for the first time. So Golden State had never, that group had never gone to the Western Conference Finals even, much less go to the finals. Real. Yeah, exactly. And everybody at that time, I mean, you got Barkley out there, man, jump shooters can't win a title. So like everybody, was still kind of looking at Golden State like, are they just a regular season paper champion? Kind of like what we were just talking about. So Golden State was number 1 in the West on that date at 47-12. The Memphis Grizzlies, this is the grit and grind, Mike Conley, Zebo, that group, they were 43-17, and Portland was 41-19. 41-19.
Well, they won their 41st game that night because
I'm counting that as a win. Yeah. So, but you're right. At the time of the Achilles, they were 40-19. Go ahead.
This is 7 for you?
This is 7 for me.
Wow.
Why? Is this higher for you?
I have this 3rd on my list.
Okay, awesome. I can't wait to get to it. Okay. Yes, so this is 7. So if this is higher for you, we can put a pin in this to talk more about it when we get to 3rd on yours. We've just kind of given away 3rd for you.
Yeah,
but we'll stick a pin in this to talk about it. But the real quick thing that I wanted to say about this was Portland ends up going 10-12 the rest of the way after that injury, and they only end up winning 51 games. Memphis what's that?
Oh, good.
Memphis ends up going 12-10, so they don't do much better, but they end up winning 55 games overall, and the Houston Rockets are the number 2 seed, and they ended up playing Golden State in the Western Conference Finals that year, and Houston was the number 2 seed with 56 wins. And I don't know if you, well, I'm sure you do remember, because this is your number 3rd moment, they were really rolling at that point. The Blazers were. Like, people were starting to actually talk about the Blazers as a dark horse contender to come out of the West. We'll get to it when we get to your number 3. So let's just jump right ahead and go to your number 6.
All right, my number 6 is something that is a little bit different twist on what you have already had, but it's Oden and Joel Prisbilla both getting hurt 18 days apart in December of 2009. So the Blazers were playing fairly well, like you said earlier. Oden was starting to come into his own, and then he dislocates his kneecap, and it was devastating. But we had Joel Prisbilla, and Joel Prisbilla was like, he wasn't like a super scorer or anything, but he did all the dirty work, and he was a tough guy, just one of those guys that good teams have, that you know, is your enforcer type. And he was playing, he comes in into the starting lineup for Oden, starts playing really well, and 18 days later he goes down with a patella tendon injury as well. And so within the span of 18 days, the Blazers lose their 2 centers, both of which were playing well, and just kind of derailed a promising season in which the Blazers a year before had finally made the playoffs against they lost to the Rockets, in which that was the Ron Artest
Yao Ming.
He was they were really physical with Brandon Roy in that series. And I was always mad that the refs let them get away with being, like, basically just grab Roy as soon as he went across half court. But I was hoping they had learned from that series, and then you got Oden back playing well. You got Joel Prisbilla as his backup in case something happens to him. And I felt like when those 2 went down, it kind of led to everything you were talking about. It felt like that was the beginning of the end for that whole Roy, Oden, Aldridge is going to win multiple championships thing. And then Roy has that surgery later that season, right before the playoffs, ends up trying to play, but it just wasn't the same. And then Oden
and Phoenix was really good. They made the West Finals that year. They were pretty tough.
And Oden just never was the same again, and has all those surgeries, like you said. Roy's never the same after that. And it's just, it felt like that was the end of an era when they both went down in that season. And it led to Roy being amnestied in 2011, and then Oden being let go shortly thereafter. And that was it for that whole promise of them. It fizzled out almost as fast as it began, and just with all the hype of those 3, and just how much those 3 were going to make the Blazers relevant again after some just really, if you weren't around for that time as a fan. To me, this is why Dame's loyalty and his tenure means a little more to me personally, is just because like I've seen the disloyalty and the the players that don't represent the city well and things like that. And to me, once you go through that and see the other side of it, it's just such a breath of fresh air to see the positive side of it, like Damian Lillard. And but this team had all the hype, man. It was such a high. And so I think I root for Dame a little more, just knowing that, like, part of it is like trying to manifest that energy and hype from that previous era into this current era, and just hoping that he can somehow lead the Blazers to a championship, to kind of overcome what happened prior to his tenure here.
I mean, I can't imagine what a championship. I can't imagine a championship meaning more to a player in a city after everything that's happened than him, if he were able to make it happen in Portland. But yeah, that's a really good one. I actually forgot about Przybilla getting injured so shortly thereafter, but you're absolutely right. Okay, so that was your number 6, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you ready for my
number 6?
Okay. I'm probably going to get skewered for this, being where it's at. Okay? But my number 6 is the Blazers losing the NBA Finals in 1990. Now, does that surprise you? That
In 90?
Yeah, in 90.
No, it doesn't surprise me at all.
Okay.
Would it surprise you that it's not on my list?
Wow, it would. I thought you were gonna say, what? You've got that way too low. That's us losing a championship. Okay, so we're kind of, even though this is still on my list at number 6, we're still like-minded. This was this was a $50 bill found on the street, right? Like, this was just a complete surprise to go from years of first-round exits to all of a sudden having the second best record in the West, 59-23, and then making it all the way to the NBA Finals. So all of this felt like an ascension. Drexler was 27 years old. Porter was 26 years old. Like, it just seemed like this was the beginning of something. So even though the games themselves, Portland, it's funny, you mentioned the Golden State series being called one of the closest 4-1 gentleman sweep series that there's ever been. That NBA Finals was as well. Yeah. Game 1, the Blazers had a double-digit lead.
Blazers are really good at almost winning.
We're so good at making a good effort. So they had a double-digit lead in Game 1. They ended up winning Game 2 on the road in Detroit, coming home to Portland, a place where the Pistons had not won in 20 years. Like, they had never won a game in Portland for 20 years, and the Pistons proceeded to win all 3 games in Portland. That's when the middle 3 games were in the team who did not have home court advantage. The series was 2-3-2, so all 3 of those games, all 3 of those games were in Portland Memorial Coliseum, and that's when we had the Game 4 Danny Young buzzer beater.
Deny, and if you can't make the steal on the inbounds pass, you are going to foul because there's still 6.5 seconds left. Porter's free throw is good, 110 to 109. See, that's smart. Let the ball stay. Make the referee give up the ball. McGuire will inbound. Everyone on his feet. Here's the pressure. Don't let your man beat you long. Thomas, there it is. To Edwards. Here's to Henderson. Gerald Henderson lays it in, and it's 112 to 109. 1 second to go. Young fires a 3. It does. Does it count? It does. It does. Mike Matheson's going to the scorer's table. I think he said yes, but we'll wait.
They're confirming right now. Now, you see, that's the old story. You score too early. They could have just held the ball at the offensive end of the floor, Detroit, and ran out the clock. Now, watch this. Here we go. You see, they jumped out of bounds.
It doesn't count. It doesn't count.
Detroit wins the pass. Here we have there. He takes 1 bounce, and he shoots. All right, the ball definitely did not leave his hand. You have the zeros on the clock.
And the Detroit Pistons now lead 3-1, and an angry Rick Adelman going after any official he can find. Danny Young's basket, time had run out. You saw it on the replay. And the Pistons have won again in Portland.
We're talking about a 100th of a second, a fraction. You could see this team was conditioned to jump out of bounds and make the pass. Now just watch as he dribbles the basketball. And as that clock is coming down here now here it is as he starts up. It's already on the zeros. And remember, in the NBA, it's the zeros on the clock, not the horn. College basketball, it's the horn that determines.
Beyond half court, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think just to step inside half court, it was called good. And this is back when they didn't go to the replay to look at it. I believe it was Ronnie Garrison called it, or Mike Mathis, I think, or whatever. But the official standing in front of Danny Young called it good, and I'll never forget Drazen Petrovic running over to him like with the motion. Yep. Is it good? Good. And you could see the ref nodding his head. I'm totally going to show this on the show, but you can see the ref nodding his head like, yes, the basket's good. The basket's good. Now, it was clearly after the...
Yeah, it was. Yeah, to be fair, it was after the buzzer.
Yeah, it was totally after the buzzer. But back then, without replay, sometimes you could get a little lucky with human error, and something working in your favor. And I just remember, seeing Clyde, like, waiting to see if it was good. And then it was called good. And then he's jumping up at the air, pumping his fists, and the crowd's going crazy. And as CBS is showing the replay, they make the announcement that the basket isn't good. So all of a sudden, we're in a slow motion instant replay, and you just hear Dick Stockton say, "The basket's no good. Detroit wins it." And it was such a heartbreaker. And I felt so bad for Danny Young in that moment, because what a great moment that would have been for Danny Young. And so, that
it would have set it into overtime, though, right?
Yeah, it would have set it into overtime. And again, you're looking at Game 4. Portland has an opportunity to tie up the series at 2-2. They would have had a ton of momentum going into that overtime. They would have had a lot of momentum. Lambeer just fouled out with 30 seconds to go when he fouled Drexler, when Drexler made 2 free throws and put them up 1. So, woulda, coulda, shoulda, didn't. That's basically the way you look at that. But, the Blazers go on to lose Game 5 at home after having, what was it, like a 7-point lead with like 2 minutes to go.
Drexler working in. What a play by Drexler on a reverse. What a beautiful play. You can't play anyone any better than that. Dumars was right there, forced him to reverse. Dumars, rebound Duckworth, the lead is 5, and time is starting to run down. Same thing now. You're shooting a penalty. Go to your strength right now, but don't allow too many seconds to go off the shot clock. Lead inside, knocked away by Percy. Buck Williams. Timeout, Detroit.
And then Vinnie Johnson just caught fire, the microwave himself.
That way, if Thomas beats his man, someone will have to pick him up. There's the pick out. Vinnie Johnson with 1 second to go. His shot is good. It's 7/10 of a second. Timeout, Portland. So Detroit must be careful. They're not playing the guy out of bounds. They're not going to allow a long pass. 7/10 of a second. There's the shot, and the game's over, and the Pistons have won the World Championship.
And then Terry Porter caught an inbound pass in the corner and actually got a pretty good look to win the game. But it was short, and the Pistons are champions, and the Blazers go into that offseason as like the media darling of this is going to be the next team. Like this is, the lumps that they needed to take, and now they'll come back the following season. And they're one of the top contenders, and in many people's estimation, that following fall, a lot of people picked the 90-91 Portland Trail Blazers to win the NBA championship. But in 1990, losing the finals, it hurt as a Blazers fan, but it also felt like we're on our way, kind of. Yeah. So that's why it didn't. It didn't even make your list.
Yeah,
that's why it wasn't higher for me.
that's exactly why it didn't hurt as much, because in the 80s, 80s were dominated by the Lakers and Celtics. They made pretty much every finals between those two outside of a couple random ones. But for several years, they had just gone back and forth winning titles and meeting each other every year in the finals. And then the year before that, the Pistons had finally broken through, and that this was their second year in a row of winning the championship. So this felt like now maybe the Blazers are overtaking the Lakers now that there wasn't, Magic and was getting older, and Kareem was gone.
Yeah. Right.
Worthy is getting older now. So you thought maybe the Blazers, it was their chance after that to jump into this. Okay, now we have a window for a few years of we're going to run the NBA. And it felt like the beginning, not the end.
So we are actually going to stop right here. This is part 1. So come back and join us for our next video, in which we will go through our top 5 Blazer painful scars. So for Eric Brandt, I am Rich Finley. Eric, do you have anything else you want to say before people come back for part 2?
Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I can't wait to bring you the second part as we get into the most painful memories and the ones that really hurt us.
Yeah, it's going to hurt a lot. Okay, so until next time.
Blazers executives are now speaking at the team's training facility in Tualatin. Let's listen in.
My name is Rich Finley, and I run the Rip City Retro YouTube channel, and it's brand new. Click like, share, subscribe. When Joe and the rest of the team and Chauncey called and asked me to come in and help with their off-season plans, I thought it was a joke. And the first thing that I said to Joe, I said, well, what are your plans for building a championship contender around Dame? And Joe said, we'd like to hear your plans. And then I said, well, I mean, right now I don't. And then he goes, no, really, I need to know your plans. In the goal of building a championship contender around Dame, which is something that this organization is committed to trying to attempt to do. And I think that level of commitment-ish really says a lot. Joe took me into the war room, as they call it here, and I looked at that big board, and the fact that it was completely white could be alarming to some people, but I really looked at it as this organization's commitment to being open to everything. I just want to say one thing real quickly about our owner, Miss Jody Allen. Jody, she saw me today in the commissary. I was having a roast beef sandwich, and she came walking right up to me, and she said, did you pay for that, or did the team? And then I said, I paid for it. And then she said, good. And those are just the positive words that this owner uses. She had me up to her office a little earlier today, and I had on a suit. I didn't have this on. And she said, we need to get you some team gear. And I said, okay, great. And she just happened to have this in her desk, and she said, you need to put this on. And then I said, I'll go change. And then she was like, no, you can just do it right here. I mean, that's the kind of owner that Jody Allen is. She just, she wanted action, and she got it right then. One thing that I would dispel about this owner is we did have a conversation about the luxury tax, and contrary to popular belief, she did not burst into a scream much like a feral cat stuck under a bed when you're trying to get it out from under it. So I would just like that to be known. So having said all that, I'm thrilled to be here, and now I'll turn it over to Joe so he can just nod uncomfortably even if he's not being asked a question. Joe?
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, click the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.